In this interview, I sit down with J.J. Carrell, whose previous job was a Border Patrol agent for over 20 years between the San Diego sector and the Arizona sector of the U.S. border. His account of what the border looks like, or what it was and what it is now, is staggering. We touch on some very disturbing topics, specifically human and children sex trafficking. This is the nature of our reality. Take a look. Kicking off another show of Zen and Call Signs, and I have a guest, J.J. Carrell, on. Sir, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and I know we're going to talk about several topics, but one is going to be uncomfortable, but one that has to be discussed. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. All right, yeah, so if you could give everybody a little bit of your background, so who you are, where you're from, up until, to right now, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. My career was in the United States Border Patrol. I was a 24-year veteran. I served under 5 presidents. The last year of my career, I was a deputy patrol agent in charge. So that just means that I was in the top senior leadership in San Diego sector. As 2,500 agents, I was about the top 25. Did 24 years. I worked the whole eastern corridor of California as well, and same thing as in Arizona. So I come with a very unique perspective because I was a guy, an agent on the ground. I wasn't the guy that did administrative stuff and tried to move up the ladder without getting dirty. To my detriment, I stayed in the field, and I became from a journeyman agent to a supervisor and ran task forces, both small and large. Then I began to rise up the ranks, but because I've been down on the border and lived it and worked it, it broke bones and broke other people's bones and had harrowing experiences, I know exactly what the heck's going on down there on the border. And I also understand what's going on within DHS with all their unconstitutional laws and orders that are being pushed down from DC. From there, I retired from the United States Border Patrol. My last year, like I said, was Joe Biden's first year in office, and I could not stomach having to follow unconstitutional orders. We are trained repeatedly throughout the academy and through training and throughout my career. You do not have to follow unconstitutional orders. In fact, you are obligated to not follow them and turn them in, the person that's violating. Everything that's happening in the United States Border Patrol right now, for 96 and a half years, we never did this ever, not one thing. Everything that's being done now is unlawful. I left resentfully. I left because I had another promotion or two within my sights. And that was my goal when I started 24 years ago, as I wanted to be the leader of my station. I was number 2 in charge. I wanted to be the guy down on the border. And I left, strangely, after being involved with Donald Trump for 2 years. Not his first 2 years. They were sabotaged by the House and Senate run by Republicans. But the last 2 years, Donald Trump, you can like him, you can hate him, I don't care. He was the greatest border president in the history of the United States of America. We were within months of having a completely shut down, secure border to go to Joe Biden and have absolute chaos and tyranny and treason. And I say that knowing what treason is, and I don't say it lightly. I left. I got completely out of the Border Patrol and out of the immigration world. I wouldn't watch TV, look at an internet site about it, read about it, talk about it with my friends, nothing, because I wanted out of it as much as I could because it disgusted me by that time. Not the people I worked with, but the people I worked for in the government. And my wife convinced me, said, hey, you're going to get back in the game or you're going to stay out of it. And I said, I think I need to get back in. Then she said, then if you're going to get back into it, then you need to make yourself legitimate right off the bat. Even though you're legitimate with your career, you need to make yourself legitimate by writing a book. So I sat there at night, coming home from work, had another job, and I would just pound away at the keyboard, as I'm not a writer. But I forced myself to become a writer. I wrote a book, researched and wrote a book, and then it was #1 bestseller on Amazon multiple times. And then I started getting into podcasts, had my own podcast, began to go on shows like yours, by tens of hundreds of them, talk about my book. And then one day, a gentleman by the name of Ryan Mattis saw me on a podcast. And Ryan has been down to the border as an investigative journalist for 3 years. but could never find anybody that could articulate exactly what the hell is going on down there. And he saw me articulating it the way that he saw it. And he called me out of the blue. We had a Zoom meeting and he said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to do a documentary. I've been waiting for years to find someone. And I said, you know what, man, I have been waiting years too, because I've had contacts with people that wanted to do it, but they wanted to do Maria's Crossing for a Better Life. And even though that is a true fact that's happening, that is not nearly, that's the tip of the iceberg, because you are seeing degradation, human smuggling, child sex trafficking, narcotics, demographic upheaval, crime, on and on and on. I want to focus on that. And he goes, that's exactly what I want to focus on. And we partnered up in March. And then April, May, June, July, we filmed nonstop. And then what we're going to talk about today, he and I created a documentary called What is Treason Invaded? About a quarter way through our filming, it became apparent, incredibly obvious, that one of the biggest parts of the documentary, which we knew we would have to cover, human trafficking, human suffering, and child sex trafficking, for more specific. And child sex trafficking became a giant elephant inside our first documentary and began to squeeze out everything. I was in this world of law enforcement and child sex trafficking, not to this extent. I knew it existed. I saw it on some level, but I was shocked at what I discovered. And my partner and I were driving through Texas on one of our long trips, long days, 20-hour days. And we talked about it and said, okay, man, if God gives us enough sales on this first documentary, then let's get back out in the field in November and film a child sex trafficking. He calls me 3 weeks ago and says, 4 weeks ago, 24 days ago, actually, we can't do this documentary. It's already there. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I have enough footage to prove what you and I believe our federal government is doing, to do this I could create 3 different documentaries on child sex trafficking. So we made a moral decision that we can't sit on this as children suffer, and we have to put it out as quickly as we can. So Ryan Matta and his editing team went to work for 24 days, and it's actually coming out tonight as our final edition tonight, and we post it tomorrow for a release at a film festival, and then we turn it loose on our website. And then October 24th, we will release our second documentary, What is Treason Invaded? So that's how I got here. I thought I might do a documentary. I wanted to do one, but it just kept fizzling out. And now I have 2. It's funny how God works. And I got on my knees many, many times when I was going through this process and begging God for a platform and let me have a voice. And sure enough, it's typical God. He just says, okay, here's everything and more. Now let me see what you can do with it. And it has been a struggle because it is a nasty, disgusting, uncomfortable topic.
Yeah, that's kind of caveat into what I wanted to ask next is, so I never thought I would even be drawn into a topic of sex trafficking, human trafficking. And once I exited the military, that was something that drew to me. And I think that someone who's a truth seeker, as I maybe, figure out for myself as I got out, that I was simply just drawn to the idea of like, nobody's talking about it. It's not in the mainstream news. Like nobody is thinking like, hey, this is an epidemic of just what I initially found was just missing children in the US, where there wasn't a lot of action taken there. And then I think even a bigger, issue is then when the migrant children, call it, come into the US, that they disappear to some degree. And so, that drew my attention of kind of like what's happening here, because there's no answers. And so maybe could you talk to your experience from Border Patrol? I'm sure you've seen a lot of children come across the border, but what then piqued your interest or the back of your mind to be like, hey, something's wrong here?
When in my career, within the first 3 years, as I'm sure when you were in the military, it's a whirlwind, right? You're just trying to figure out where the hell you're supposed to go, and you're trying not to stumble in front of your superiors, and you're trying to make your name, right? So it wasn't until about 3 years into the Border Patrol that I looked around and went, this isn't adding up. None of this is adding up, meaning the politicians are playing politics with national security and sovereignty. They want votes. Oh, they want cheap labor. That's when I knew Unfortunately, I'm a true seeker like you. God built me a certain way, not to just accept things as they are because I'm told, but to look around and have some critical thinking ability and look and go, whoa, this doesn't make sense. I'm on the border and we're shutting the border down, but I go home after shift and in the bus stops that I pass, there's 10, 15, 20 illegal aliens. I go to Home Depot. I can't get into the parking lot without hitting 100 illegal aliens. What is going on? I saw child sex trafficking. I saw the smuggling of children, but it was few and far between. I want your audience to understand what happens in present time in humanity is you begin to think that that is normal, that has always been this way. That's a lie. Let me give you just an easy example. President Trump, throughout his years as president, he averaged between 10, 15,000 unaccompanied alien children called UACs. That's a lot, right? That was because of Obama, all because of Obama. That rattled in, this disgusting scourge rattled in, but it was 10 to 15,000. So over a 2,000-mile border, 365 days a year, that's not that much, right? You can handle it. It's part of the job, and then you have mechanisms in place and rules and regulations and policies, and you follow it, and there's follow through and follow up. Now you go to the first year of Joe Biden, we go from 10,000 to 120,000 and 20,000. Did that government, Joe Biden's government, do anything to stop it, to stem it, to even block it? Did nothing. In fact, they accelerated it. They made it more efficient. How do I know that? Because it continued to grow for the next 4 years. We're going to surpass 500,000 unaccompanied alien children, and they will all be lost. Health and Human Services admitted in 2023 they lost 85,000. They did nothing for the next year except accelerate it and make it more efficient. Now the Inspector General of DHS came out last week and said, no, that 85,000 number is a mistake. It's over 320,000 out of the 450,000 children that we had in our custody. Now, let me make sure your audience understands this. 130,000 children that we have, quote, have management of. Let me explain to you what the welfare check on these children are so you understand the absurdity of this. I work for an NGO. I call the sponsor, not a Zoom call like you and I are on Riverside, just a call, a phone call. And the person on the other end, I've never met them. I've never heard their voice. I have no idea who they are. And I ask them, is little Maria there? Yep, she's right here. Okay, thank you. Bye. That is the welfare check. That is the 130,000 illegal alien children that our government says, no, they're okay. The other 320 they're missing, we have no idea where they are. It's absurd. They've lost every child. Why? How do you lose a child? You're a father. I'm a father. I know where my son is. You can ask me in the middle of the day, where's your son? Well, he's at this school. This is the address. He's most likely in lunch or he's in music class. And then I pick him up. We go to football practice, grab a snack, have dinner, take a shower, read a book, pray, and go to bed. I know where my son is. I've never lost him. Never lost him. How do you lose 320,000 children? You lose them because they're gone into child sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or they're dead because you've harvested their organs or you have child sacrificed them. This is a true, proven thing. You can't dispute it. You can call me all the crazy names you want, all that guy's a conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it all and it's ridiculous. You don't like my conclusion because it makes you uncomfortable to think that the number one consumer of child pornography in the world is the United States of America. It makes you uncomfortable because the number one payer of child sex payment, cash money, is the United States of America. How do you think a nation filled with millions of pedophiles that they are not going to have their habit and their perverse desires not fulfilled? Are you kidding me? This is a supply and demand economy, just like narcotics. Narcotics do not go into inner cities and disappear by the millions of tons a year. That means Americans across spectrums are snorting cocaine, shooting heroin, smoking marijuana. It doesn't die in the cities, just like illegal alien children. They just don't disappear like into space. They're either shackled to some bed somewhere, tricking themselves, or they are being sold and their organs are being harvested. It's sick. You don't have to like it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true.
How do you bring this into the collective consciousness and then have them understand it? I mean, I think that, I say that, but I think it's with the movie, with a movie like with your documentary, Sound of Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But there seems to be a collective, let's say a mass formation around the idea that they don't want to because it's too uncomfortable, or a cognitive dissonance where they can't pull themselves out of the pleasure trap that they're in. Do you think it's just, how do we do that? Maybe having conversations like this, but you've been doing this for a little while. What is it, do you think, that needs to be shown to the collective consciousness that this exists, not in like some far off continent, but like next door, maybe every, how many, again, like hundreds of thousands of children. And we're just talking about maybe the recent numbers. Because I think another number is just, the missing children in the U.S. over the past 10, 20 years, like how many children?
Millions.
Right, is it? Yeah.
Millions. So how do you get it? I'll tell you how you do it. You have to be bold, unafraid, and unapologetic. You have to stand in front of the face of those savages, those horrific, evil people, and those politicians and media. And you have to stand tall, and you just have to speak the truth. And when they mock you or they question you, you hit them with square between the eyes with facts, because that's their kryptonite. And you just tell them, this is how it is, and this is what's going on. Just like when I go give speeches about the border, and everyone wants to talk about this. It's almost as it's strange. They don't want to hear it, but they need to hear it. And they want to hear it, but they don't want to hear it. And what I tell them, and I tell everybody I speak about this, I say, listen, we're going to talk about this. And I need to say this. I feel like I'm a kind and compassionate and understanding man outside of this world. But in this world, because of things that I know is happening, I don't care about your feelings. I don't care that you're uncomfortable, because statistically, probability-wise, there are tens of thousands of children right now being raped as you and I speak. It is statistically, that is what would happen if you have millions of children inside America that are, quote, lost. And I think the only way, and not just on this topic, Blake, I think it's on all topics, the economy, the crazy wars, the gender, the 6 genders. I can rip your genitals off at 5 years old and I can make you the opposite sex. No, I just created someone that is most likely going to kill themselves because they're a monster now. And we need to speak in those terms instead of being these very impotent and soft conservatives and or / Christians, because we have been told lies our whole life about, well, you shouldn't be judgmental, and, let God judge, and God loves everybody, and he, don't worry about those 10 commandments. Though that's just if you want to listen to it. And we all got along, and because our pastors and priests, because they're pedophiles too, they're like, oh yeah, everything's fine. No, not everything is fine. It's not. And if we don't stop talking, if we keep this conversation at low levels and try to whisper, hey man, did you know that no. How about you be a man and talk about it exactly how it is? Let me just ask you something, Blake. You talked about the children in America, and I'm so glad you brought it up. And I know you and I talked a little bit offline. The numbers of lost children, the statistics they're like all over the place. It's like you can't get a real number. So the numbers that I come across is somewhere, this is crazy, somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 children are lost every year. Okay?
Yeah, I saw that, and I tried to figure out, like, where does that number come from? And then as you start digging into that, it doesn't have good data to support that. To just like, who's making this number up?
Yeah, and that begs another question. We categorize and count everything in this world. You're not counting children? Why are you not counting children? Well, there's a reason, because the number's greater than 400 and 800,000. But just for this experiment of critical thinking, let's say it's 500,000. Joe Biden, and this is not a Democrat Republican. This is a uniparty. We have disgusting people in both parties. But under Joe Biden's time as president, he has lost 2 million people. Children. They lost another 500,000 children from foreign nations. 2.5 million children. Blake, have you been seeing in America any pictures of roaming children with tattered clothes, dirty faces, living in shelters with no parents and starving? The answer is no, you haven't.
No.
So my question is, where in the hell are all these children? Where are they? You can't hide. Look, the pen in my hand, 2.5 million of them. I can't lose 2.5 million of anything. I know where everything is. Think about losing a child, dude. They have no idea where these kids are. And here's the kicker of all kickers. They don't care. They don't care. And you know what America cares more about? And I'm going to give you a great example. Just happened this week. They care more about your dogs and cats, pets. Made across America, illegal aliens are ransacking small towns and cities across America. Just devastating. Whitewater, Wisconsin, Aurora, Colorado, and now Springfield, Ohio is being destroyed by 20,000 illegal alien Haitians that make up 20,000 of them in a community now of 60,000. So 1 in 3 residents speaks French, can't work, and are crazy third world people in a small town of 60,000. And what are they doing? And they mocked Donald Trump and said, oh, he's crazy. But it turns out, no, actually Donald Trump's right again. And I've been following this because this is what I do. The Haitians are taking ducks and geese out of the ponds and killing them and taking their pets and eating them and sacrificing. And that is what people are focused on. The cats and the dogs. They don't focus on the kids dying. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Was there a culminating moment when you were Border Patrol in San Diego? And so I lived in San Diego for 13 years that, changed you? I figure you probably had a lot of different experiences like that, but was there some culminating moment that kind of defined the path that you're on now?
That's a good question. I don't think there was one defining moment. I think it was a multitude of ones that I continue to see the border as a desolate, chaotic, hopeless piece of property. That's like a different country. And even people in San Diego don't even know what it's like, right? Let me give you an example. I can be on top of a mountain. It's called a hill in California called Spooner's Mesa. And it's the greatest view of San Diego you could ever imagine. It's unbelievable. I can see Coronado. I can see Hotel Del. I can see Point Loma, the San Diego Bay. I can see it's spectacular. Like if you built a house there, you would sell it for $20 million minimum. 100 yards to my south is the third world nation of Mexico and Tijuana. It was like I was on another planet. And then the violence, the violence, dude, the violence day in and day out, the desperation. And what I say when I say that is a culmination of being there, only the very strong survive in that border. I'm talking smugglers, Border Patrol agents, the people being smuggled. Border Patrol agents are weak, they're going to get devoured. The human smugglers get weak, they're going to get destroyed by their own people or by us. And what I realized early on in my career is I became extremely desensitized to everything. And then I realized maybe to my detriment, but I think it says a lot about who I am in a good way and a lot of who I am in a bad way, that it didn't matter to me anymore.
Yeah.
That I was good at what I did. I was a top performer in San Diego sector. I made the arrest. I ran task forces. I was unflinching in fighting MS-13 in the middle of the night, chasing large groups and taking them down and fighting, because everyone that crossed in through Tijuana into San Diego the majority of them were violent criminals. And it was going to be every single day, if you can imagine, every single day you're going to work. And when I ran my ATV units, it was absolute for certainty. Every day I'd go to work, myself or one of my guys were going to be violently assaulted. And we were going to have to do everything we could to make somebody submit and be arrested. It was exhilarating. I loved it. And I thrived in that world. And I know that that's some negative about me, because honestly, I do not think you can be an effective and successful law enforcement officer if you do not have a little bit of that criminal inside of you. I don't care how that sounds, That's just the freaking truth, man, because you are dealing with savages. I'm not pulling someone over that's like me and you and going to roll the window down and yes, sir, and no, sir. I'm getting MF'd and I'm getting punched and throwing stuff at, and all bets are off, my friend. It's me and you now. And that's what the culmination of how I got here and how I am desensitized. And I will be honest, at the very first couple weekends of traveling and constantly having to interview people dealing in this sick, evil child sex trafficking, it was a little unnerving. It took me several days to unwind and unpack that out of my brain.
Yeah.
But sadly, I will tell you, I have fallen back into my old ways of not allowing it to affect me. Now, if I see a pedophile touching a child, I know that I will revert to a violent way. I know I will. I know I'll have a visceral reaction to it. But right now, seeing it on paper, video, talking to people, I walled that off from any sensibilities that I have.
Well, I think that's important to compartmentalize to a degree because it's outside of the realm of, I believe, what we think. I kind of I operate with love and compassion, but I'm always ready to kill a motherfucker, and I think that's there's a balance because I have daughters and a son and wife, and you have children where you essentially turn the switch off, one off, and I think in this realm of this is the ultimate evil. How else could it be described? To take that innocence. So there has to be Viking or warrior or something like that to stop it. Like that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm having this conversation with you.
Can we just stop for 1 second and because I think this is very important. You and I are talking about evil, rightfully so, but let's describe it. Let's describe what it actually we're talking about. Let's not dance around it. Let's just talk about it. So I interview these men that go in and rescue these children. And I ask them, because I would always, in the border, I would see it. They would throw their kids on the trail and run away and leave their crying little toddler there. And I would have to pick them up or someone have to pick up the kid. And we would see that they would just throw their kids away. And the idea that we're all the same is such a joke, right? Like America is great because we're like everyone else. No. I don't believe that. That's a lie. If you ever traveled throughout the world, you realize America is very unique. The people are very unique. So I asked these guys, I want to know, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like when you go and you rescue these children? And one guy's name's Basil. He's going to be in my documentary. Basil was a former CIA operative and a special forces operator. And he only recruits special operators in his group that go hunt for these children and rescues them. So he's been doing it forever and is very successful. And he said to me, before we start talking about like what it looks like, I need you to understand the physicality of what we're talking about.
During this part of the interview, JJ describes what is actually happening to these children when they're being raped. It's too graphic to share on any platform, so it won't be in this part of the episode. It'll be taken out. But it's some of the most abhorrent acts that men and women can do to children. The most horrific things that I've ever heard. However, these acts need to be brought to the collective consciousness to understand what is actually happening. What is the nature of our reality? What is happening right now with humans and children being sex trafficked in our world? Nietzsche said it best, and it goes something like this. The strength of a person's spirit must be measured by how much truth he can tolerate, or more precisely, to what extent an individual likes it diluted, disguised, sweetened, muted, or falsified.
I'll give you an example. There was a guy I just saw posted or someone I knew showed me something and said, hey, listen, I want you to listen to this. Guy was talking about a 3-year-old girl that was raped 34 times. Let me repeat that, 34 times. If a woman is raped one time in her life, no matter how much therapy she has, how much faith she has, she carries that burden and that pain and that sorrow and that destruction her whole life, and rightfully so. Imagine being raped 34 times. Imagine being raped 10 times a day. 10 times a day, you know nothing else. You're 3 years old. You grow up as being a rape toy. A young girl raped 37 times. 37 surgeries on her vagina in order for her to just urinate like a human being. Do you think that those men and women, do you think that we should just put them in jail for a couple years? Or do you think they should be eradicated off the face of the earth? And when someone pushes back and says, well, that's against the 10 Commandments, and I follow back, no. The 10 Commandments states, you shall not murder. You shall not kill. Words matter. And that's how they have tricked us in theology, is manipulated God's words. If you do not think that those people should be eradicated from planet Earth, then you and I need to have a really deep and honest discussion about where we lie on certain things. Because if somebody touches my son, I'm going to tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I don't care what happens to me, I will hunt you down. I will spend every last dime I have. I won't sleep until I find you. But this is what's happening in America. What I told you about a little girl being raped 34 times is not an anomaly. This is happening every day. We're allowing it into the country. Look, I would love to talk to you about how our federal government has become the world's largest child sex trafficking organization in modern history. Do you know, after all the interviews I did about a dozen very, very accomplished individuals that are in positions of knowledge and have access to intelligence and information. And I would finish all of my interviews. My interviews would last 2 hours to over 5 hours. And Blake, my last question I would ask them, okay, we're done, but I need to ask you, I'm going to ask you something, but it's actually a statement. And I just want a yes or no from you. That's all I want. They're like, okay, I believe the United States government is the world's largest child sex trafficking in modern history. I couldn't get history out of my mouth, and they were shouting at me, yes, yes, yes. They are smuggling children. They're sexually smuggling children, and they know it. They know they're doing it. The first 2 times, I literally almost jolted back like, okay, I wasn't ready for that. That's how adamant they are. So am I going to believe Kamala Harris cackling on the stage and saying, oh, that's Donald Trump's crazy and there's no open borders and there's no child sex trafficking? Or am I going to believe my 24 years in the Border Patrol and speaking to people that I have high level of respect for? I'm going to go with them, and I'm going to realize that the media and the politicians are lying scumbags. Because You know why they lie? Because the vast majority of them, or a very significant majority of them, are into pedophilia. And that is a proven fact. We have a president right now that has dementia, but he is for serial assaulter of women. There is no man. You said you have a daughter. Would you ever allow any man to hug, sniff, put his face in your daughter's face, cup her breast or her thighs, and invade her personal space? Would you ever allow that to happen? And then he does it over and over and over and over again. And everyone acts as if he's a doddering old grandpa. My father was a grandpa. My father never touched any of my nieces like that. Never, ever. So what my point is, pedophilia is so rampant, it's so in your face because they feel emboldened, because we have allowed them as a society to become normal. Raping children has become normal. Touching children means you're a minor attracted person. You're no longer a pedophile. Why are we allowing this in America? Why? Because we are a moral rot in America right now. And everyone knows it. Maybe not to the depth that I know it, but they know it. They feel it. It's obvious. You have to be a complete moron not to see it.
What happens after the child isn't needed anymore? And I guess we go into harvesting their organs, and this is kind of like the next layer of the horror.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm always honest, and I'll be honest with you. I was quite ignorant about this part of it, because when I was in it, right, for 24 years, but not really in that world. So when I started to discover it, it's hard to get past someone raping a 1-year-old baby. It's beyond, right? You just get stuck. Your brain just kind of gets locked in, like. But then I was interviewing all these people, and they would tell me, hey, JJ, I've been watching your videos, and I see and I know that you're posting your trailers about the child sex trafficking, but you're missing 2 parts. And I'm like, oh God, okay. So They would say, JG, you're missing two parts. First, you have child sex trafficking and child labor trafficking that's happening in America. He says, but what you're missing is you're missing the organ harvesting, and then you're missing the child sacrifice. And then they said to me, and you're also missing another big part, is you keep talking about all of the trafficking coming from the South into the North, and you're not talking about all the American kids that are kidnapped by the Mexican cartels and brought into Mexico and flown into Africa. And I'm like, what? Yeah, Africa. Why? And he says, well, that's where they harvest the organs of the children in Africa. I said, well, why are they doing that? They have all these throwaway kids in Africa. I mean, I'm not saying it's okay by any means, but in their culture, they're just throwing their kids away. In Latin America, throwing their kids away. And he says, well, they do that because they believe that, and he goes, I have no idea if this is true or not, but this is what the market says. The market says that American children have less parasites, less parasitic, so their organs have more value. So they'll take them and harvest their organs and then just dump the body or sell the body for child sacrifice. And that is happening in America. Listen to what Donald Trump said. You don't have to like him. Again, I don't really care. I'll be very honest. I'm a MAGA guy. Do I think is he the savior? No, but I believe he is the one that has any ability to get us out of what we're in. Listen to what he said multiple times in interviews and in his speeches. He says the 320,000 children, quote, a lot of them are already dead. He knows. He has access to all the data. He has the inside scoop on everything. He knows. We all know. You can't, again, we come back to the 2.5 million in 4 years. What was the last 10 years, Blake? 30 million kids lost? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, exactly.
Is it 10 million? We know it's not 2 million. We know it's beyond 2 million. We know it's closer to 20. I could probably settle in and go, okay, I can deal with that number. 20 million? Well, where the hell did 20 million kids come from? Where are they? They all just grew up and remained silent? Like all those kids that got butchered their whole lives became adults and didn't say anything? Okay, all right. You see the absurdity of it? Of course, they are killing these children. Of course they are. This is not something, I love this too. Well, America, we're enlightened. We're in the enlightened age. We would never do this. Those barbarians in the biblical times sacrificed children. The Aztecs did, but they're savages. They're not like us. Really. So you're okay. Your argument is that Americans would never kill babies, and yet we've killed 60 million babies through abortion. Whatever you want to say, it's a baby. We're going to have this discussion, but for the short time that we have, you killed 60 million babies, and you're telling me that you can't fathom a group of individuals that are evil and Satanists that are not going to sacrifice children? Is that the argument? That's the hill you're going to die on? Is that one? God. The history, current evidence, and the insight that we have now, it is with a shadow of a doubt that all of this is happening in America. All of it. The question is, do you want to know? And then the bigger question is, once you get told this, or you see my film or Sound of Freedom or the next one coming out, you can't unsee it. And then you are left with a dilemma in your soul, not in your heart or your mind, it's in your soul. Do you remain silent and complicit, or do you get involved, whatever they may be? I'm not saying you got to go write a documentary and spend money and write a book. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to have a conversation. You need to go to city council and ask their mayor, we only have 3 people on our police force that are linked to child trafficking. Why is that? We need to have funding for at least 50. Why? You better get that. Sheriff, I'm not going to vote for you again if you do not stand up a large child sex trafficking organization that goes after these people. If you're not, I'm going to single-handedly do everything I can to get you removed from office. That's how you get involved.
So the next layer, I feel like, of the human trafficking aspect of if they do organ harvesting, and then, you touched on abortions, that, abortion is technically legal. And I think I can reserve my opinion on, your body, your right. That's, I actually, I'm not too interested in that. What I am interested is, and where I make my standpoint, my thought is, after an abortion, who gets the baby, and then what's the business behind that?
It's a
And I
huge
think
business.
that's the part that's important to me, of like, hey, everybody, I respect your right to choose and body and all of that. However, is it, it's like, where does that fetus go? Who is profiting from that, and why? That is the important part to me, which, no, again, same thing, nobody talks about.
No.
But it's
It,
just the legal market, maybe call it the gray market, is 20, 30, 40 billion. Like, I don't know, who knows? It's a huge market. And then, so if you have millions of undocumented children come in, that then just feeds that market, right? You can wash that money or organs through it. So what's your kind of thought on that?
Well, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that does go unnoticed, right? People say, "Well, they're not organ harvesting." My God, JJ, are you real? Are you serious? And I go, "Okay, hold on, hold on. Are you telling me you have not seen the undercover videos of the abortionists laughing and joking and talking about making deals with people about, you need an arm, I can get you a lung, I can get you a kidney, I can get you a head"? Are you that intellectually stunted that you don't know anything? And it gets to a point, Blake, I think, and I don't know how you feel, but I'm getting to that point. I'm 55 years old. I'm tired of having to educate people that are functionally just morons. We're talking right now at like a college level. I don't mind if you're a high schooler and you're trying to get to college and you're really actively researching, I'm going to talk to you. But if you're down there with Joe Biden and those morons, and you're going to try to argue with me about whatever, it's just, this is just their clump of cells, or this is open borders is not a big deal. I don't have time. I don't care to educate you. I just don't. Look, the more that I am exposed to things, even in this documentary, the more I'm exposed to things, the more I speak to people about things, the more I realize how ignorant I am. And I think
Yeah.
if you are an intellectually honest person, you will say to yourself, I don't know everything. In fact, I don't know much of anything. So you become a sponge and you begin to listen. And then as a law enforcement guy, my brain's wired to begin to piece together the puzzle or connect the dots, whatever you like the analogy, and then formulate my probable cause for what I believe and why I believe it. So I'm not coming on your show today to sell a book or sell my document. I don't give a crap if you buy any of those. And I'm not saying anything for any gain. I don't enjoy it. I'll be very honest with you. I don't like it talking about this. I I don't like talking about children being raped. You think this is enjoyable to have this rattle rain in my brain? There's no enjoyment. I got a 13-year-old son. I would love to be out there throwing the football with him, which I'm going to do when I get done, and try to block this crap out of my head. My point is that this is real. You don't have to like that I wear a black t-shirt, or I have my hair this way, or I'm a white man, whatever the hell that means anymore. I just don't care about how you interpret what I say, but what I say is the truth. And I always come back to people and say, you don't like my conclusion, but you agree all of my data is right on the money because I'm using government data, the same government that you genuflect and as a religious act believe everything they say. I'm giving you their numbers, and your response is, yes, I believe the numbers are correct and your data is correct. I just don't like your conclusion that the American government is evil and the American government traffics children. And my response or my retort to that is, if you don't believe that, then why don't you tell me what the hell's going on?
Right.
And then we sit in complete silence, Blake. Complete silence. And as a podcaster, 2 seconds feels like 2 minutes. 30 seconds feels like eternity. And I just sit there and we stew in it. And I just sit there. I'm waiting. And I literally say that sometimes. I'm waiting. And their response is, to some of their credit, I've had liberals tell me I do not have a response. And therefore, I need to do some research and some soul searching on this. Fair enough. I can live
Right.
with that.
Yeah.
But to tell me I'm crazy just because you don't have an answer, but I do, very well researched and experienced, and I'm coming to you with, here's my thesis. Here's all my citations. Everything I believe is backed up. Okay, go ahead, dissect it. I want you to dissect it because if I'm wrong, I want to know. If these 2.5 million children the last 4 years are in Disneyland enjoying themselves and having Slurpees and eating funnel cakes, I want you to show me those pictures and say, JJ, they're all good. Thank God I'm wrong. I don't want to be right. Do you want to be right about this, Blake? I don't want to be right about this. I want to be 100% wrong. I want to be ridiculed for believing this. That's what I want, but I know I can't because it's true. This is all true.
When you sit down and have a conversation like this, where these are the only types of conversations I like to have, JJ, so I just did a podcast. So, and I think that, as we discussed offline beforehand, for somebody to be a fly on the wall and listen to this conversation from the horse's mouth, who's seen it, who's been in it, who's experienced it in and seen the horror of it, is important for everybody to see, no matter if I have to do another, 1,000 episodes or something. And I, like you did, like creating a documentary so it can live on in posterity. So like, hey, here is the delineation mark in history where we can say enough is enough. And again, and maybe to my question in the beginning of like raising the collective consciousness to be like, hey, this is real. And I think the Sound of Freedom was Henry Caviezel on the Sean Ryan show was the first time that I saw kind of on, not mainstream, but on a platform that wasn't censored, that I saw, somebody who's a famous actor with with Sean, describe and talk about things I'd only discussed with my wife and maybe one buddy of mine who's, we'd call him I wouldn't say a conspiracy theorist, but a conspiracy fact guy. I mean, but he was always ostracized to a degree. And then I see Henry Caviezel, I'm like, Jesus, talking about, everything that's happening. And even, I don't even know if we'll have to edit this out, but even adrenochrome, which I heard about, again, a buddy of mine long time ago. And then when I see him speak to this, I was kind of, pulled back a shock, like, okay, it's happening now, where it's kind of in, like, people are kind of know what it is. I mean, that's a question for you. It's like, is this all to facilitate just the greed and for power and for power's sake? Then this is something like that.
I think it is. And as we're talking, and I've been thinking, like, I'm sure I'm like you. You go into your own mind and you're driving or something, and what I do is I begin to question everything that I'm saying. Like, just question it. Like, are you on the right page? Are you sure that you're reading this data right? Are you sure that you're hearing it right? Because it's so crazy. But one thing that I have not struggled with, but I have been very interested in probably the last 3 weeks, okay, is more and more and more stories of child sex trafficking, people speaking openly about it on X and Facebook to a point, because Facebook is censored. It's talked about. There's more news stories on mainstream news, right, and local news. And I ask myself, what's going on? Or is it becoming more mainstream? And what does that mean? And I'm starting to believe, and I could be wrong, and this is just a theory that I have right now, and I'm sure this will play out rapidly. I believe one of my beliefs or theories is they're letting you know.
Controlled opposition?
Correct. I'm floating this trial balloon out there, and I'm getting you ready for the absolute chaos of child sex. And it's going to be wild and chaotic, and then it's going to normalize out. And then on some level, it'll be okay. It will be okay to have an abortion the first 5 days that you're pregnant, the first 5 weeks, the first 5 months, outside the vaginal canal. What? How did we get there? Right? This is happening no matter what the moderators told President Trump. Nobody's killing babies outside the womb. That's a lie. It's documented. Just stop already. Again, my point is not to argue abortion. My point is the slippery slope. So now we're going to go 18. No, it's 15 years old. 13. I think 9-year-olds. I think 9-year-olds know what a penis and a vagina is, and they know if they want it touched. Okay, bam, 9 years old. That's what we're getting to. I think that is more of the reason why we're seeing more of it, is because they're getting us ready to be normal to it. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I don't. What do you think? I'd like to hear your thoughts on just what I just said. Do you think that that's a probability?
In California, and I don't know if you're there now, Norm, but there are many laws that
Mm-hmm.
have kind of like a one link in the chain at a time to
Yep.
change the age of consent and these different things. And I think that that's kind of the role of transgenderism too, of that it, emasculating, again, I don't know where I'm going with that, but emasculating men to make
Mm-hmm.
weak men in society that, you know, that aren't strong and can't protect anybody because they're
Mm-hmm.
harmless.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's a calculated effort, and it's hard to quantify, but it is. But that's the deal, as you discussed. There's millions of children
Mm-hmm.
missing, and like you said, the pen, like we lost. Like maybe the Pentagon can lose a couple trillion, but but the IRS certainly knows if I owe them, $5,000 in taxes.
Yep. Yep.
But
They
we've
do.
lost millions of children, the emasculation of men, you just start, then inflation to, again, destroy the middle class, the people that
Mm-hmm.
drive the economy. I mean, you just look at all of these little tangents and they add up to argue over a Democrat or Republican. That's the opposite side of the same coin to some degree.
Yeah. The
Over the
uniparty.
past 20, yeah, right. The uniparty, 25 years, the debt has only creeped up under Republicans, Democrats, and all of the programs and where you're like, what's actually changed at all in the past 20, 25 years, or in the whole time war on terror between Iraq and Afghanistan, and all of the men that we've lost. And,
Mm-hmm.
again, same thing in as we touched on offline of, veteran suicide. It's another thing, a statistic that everybody's like, whoop, nope, it's like, it's a little different, but
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, don't worry about that.
They
Where it's
got, well,
like,
it became normal. 22
right,
people killing themselves a day that are veteran. It's normal.
right,
Hey, it's just 22,000. It's only 22 a day.
right.
That's okay.
Yeah,
And you talked about California. California just passed a law that if you rape a child, you're a pedophile and have sex with a minor, which is rape. It's a misdemeanor. It's a
right.
misdemeanor. So
Another,
you can
yeah,
already see it becoming normalized, because when
right,
we leave being a misdemeanor, it's just going to be, the kid was only 9. He just turned. What? Okay, that's going to be the argument. Did you know he was 8, or did you believe he was 9? Age of consent. We're going to have these discussions. You're laughing at me. People are going to laugh
yeah,
and go, "You're
yeah,
insane." Really? Okay. All right. So raping a child in California is a misdemeanor. It's not a violent sexual rape that's a felony and put to death. Nope. He's going to serve 60 days in jail and pay a fine. Oh, okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's the world, unfortunately, America, and the idea. Let me. I have to go, but I want to finish on this, if you don't
yeah,
mind.
yeah,
And I say this as a fallen, as a sinful Christian, okay? And it doesn't mean Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, whatever. If you think for a second that the real God, the God that is in the Old Testament, not the hippie freak Jesus LGBT crap that we've been dealt with our whole life, that is a fantasy. That's a unicorn fantasy. The God that hates to be mocked, the God that just refuses to bend a knee to any of this insanity, and the God that said, if you harm one of my children, I'm going to tie a millstone to your neck and I'm going to toss you into the sea. Are you telling me that God, that same one that we both know about, is looking down on us and he's not going to rain judgment on us? You're a fool. You are a fool, or you're just a straight up hardcore atheist and you don't give a crap about anything. I'm telling you, there's judgment coming. That's why I continue to speak out loud, knowing it's a detriment of my whatever. Because my two driving forces is my son realizes that when you believe in something, you stand up and you say it out loud. And you don't bend a knee no matter what they try to do to you. It's because my son's going to be a strong Christian man. And the other part is, with all of my sins, all of my flaws that should make me go to hell for eternity, I pray that when I go up and stand in front of God, he looks at me and says, you spoke the truth when no one else wanted to hear it. Get in. You're lucky. It's your lucky day, JJ. Get in. That's what I'm banking on. If people think they're going to censor me and demonetize me, I'm not going to stop talking about this. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And if you don't like it, then turn me off. Live in your fantasy land of everything's okay and your children are just fine. Because it's interesting, Blake, what I always find very interesting, crime and pain and suffering is okay if as long as it isn't in your family. But the moment it touches you, what do you want? You want justice. You want damnation on that person. Well, how about we stop having everyone else have pain and suffering and eradicate this from our society? However, you have to eradicate it. I'm for any and all options, but I want it gone. I'm tired of having to look over my son. I'm tired of having to drive into a park and look around and see if there's any pedophiles because they stand out. What is that white man in his 50s doing in a park, sitting in a car all by himself for 2 hours with no children? Who does that? I don't do that when my son's not there. I go and do my life, right? So they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're in our churches. They're in our hospitals. They're in our politics and media. They're in the Boy Scouts. They're everywhere. And I'm tired of it, to be honest with you. But I appreciate, man, you giving me such wide berth to talk about this. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's what I think needs to happen. It's hard to understand the truth. And I believe that pulling the veil back on the true nature of our reality is key for our whole world, US, whoever, to, I don't know if it's transcend, but to elevate ourselves, to like eliminate this. This can be eliminated from our society because this has been going on for thousands of years.
Yep.
And it needs to be like brought to the forefront of everybody's consciousness of like, this is happening, this is real, and it's not in some, like you said, some far off land. It is right at your doorstep. And I think that everybody needs to understand that a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Well, thank you for being on, JJ. It's been a pleasure. And we'll be signing off now. See ya.
Thank you.